We're here to run it back to talk about this past weekend and what we discovered as we went through our series called Face to Face. Now, we saw Jesus is dealing with a man at the Pool of Bethesda in the way that he does with everybody else, in a nuanced and a careful way, respectful of everything from the man's life experience to his physical state to his emotional state. The man has been sick for 38 years. And in spite of that, Jesus is about to break that pattern. He's about to change everything. After the man is healed, Jesus tells him to take up his mat and go. So as he's going, the Bible tells us that as he's leaving, the man is asked by the religious leaders, "Why are you carrying your mat on the Sabbath?" It was against the law to carry your mat on the Sabbath, but they didn't realize exactly what had happened to this man. And so I'm sure he looked under his arm and said, "Oh, this was the mat that used to carry me. And now I'm carrying this because I've been healed." And it's only later that he actually discovers who it was who healed him. So the religious leaders are upset at this moment and they want to argue with the man, but they don't get very far. In John chapter 5, we can read what he says. After they challenge him, it says, he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.' So they asked him, 'Who is this fellow who told you to pick up your mat and walk?' And the man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there." The man says, "I don't have an answer to your question, actually." He says, "All I know is that the man who healed me told me to do this." I love how the man doesn't need to have a right answer in order to respond. He just needs to have a real experience. I can remember being new in my relationship with Christ, and as a teenager, having experienced this deep awakening of my faith in Christ and my relationship with Him, I was excited to tell other people about what God had done in my life. Usually, I was more excited than they were to hear it. But I did have a lot of conversations with people, and many of those conversations ended up in the same way. They would ask me these difficult questions about Christianity, questions that I wasn't equipped to answer yet, questions about life's meaning and philosophy, and I would eventually come back around to the same place about how God had changed my life. So here's what I want to say today. Here's what I want to focus on. A person with a testimony is never at the mercy of a person with an argument. I worked with young people for decades, and I used to wonder what were the threads that you could see that certain groups of kids had in common. Those who were young people who grew up and remained in the faith into adulthood. Maybe they veered off, but eventually they found their way back. And I ran across a longitudinal study, a long-term study of young people who'd grown up in church, been raised in the Christian faith, and it kind of examined where they were in adulthood. And it was just this study that was trying to tease out and to figure out the difference. What was the difference maker for the kids who stayed in the faith into adulthood? Now, I'll just tell you, the one difference wasn't the size of the church that they went to. It wasn't the quality or even existence of a youth program that they were a part of. It wasn't even the sincerity of their parents who raised them in the faith. This study said the vast majority of those young people who remained in the faith into adulthood had a personal experience with the presence of God. They had their own personal experience and encounter with the Lord. I want you to think about that. It is the difference maker. The person who has a testimony is never at the mercy of a person with an argument. It's not that there's not a place for reasoning or for reasoned argument, but we cannot be reasoned into faith, and for that reason, we cannot be reasoned out of it. We'll find that God is able to change us before we have all the answers. He's able to heal us before we have it all figured out. He's able to give us a testimony that can outlive and withstand any objections, because we can say, just like Job, who suffered but still believed, we can say, "I know that my Redeemer lives."